Bezat Hashem, Chevra, we are holding today Lamed Amud Aleph at the top of the page in Masechet Shabbat, and we're going to have really three sections in today's learning. The first section, Bezat Hashem, we're going to finish off this Nikudah discussing the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. So we had two ways of understanding him yesterday, Rabba and Rav Yosef, and we just started this connected sugya about Chilufa Bechalta, which we'll get to today. The second section we'll speak about is going to be the other shitot, really, which is Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbi Yossi, in terms of the zman bein hashmashot.
כהרף ולא.
חצי מיל וכהרף עין. And we'll get in terms of psak also, which we'll get to at the end. And the third section, Bezat Hashem, if we get there, I hope we will, we're going to start learning about a different sugya in Lamed Amud Bet, which is that there was tkiyot done Erev Shabbat to symbolize Shabbat was coming. It's like today in Yerushalayim, they do the siren. They do a siren. So they used to do the same thing.
They bring the Mishnah of Sukkah, the end of Sukkah, they bring this one.
This idea, right? This is it's brought here because we're talking about Shabbat starting.
Kiyot.
We should do it in Miami too. We should do
Six
a siren.
Six kiyot.
We're going to speak about Mamash.
In Brooklyn, I think they do it also.
In Borough Park, they do it. In Bnei Brak, they do it.
Places.
It has to be a city that's mostly Jewish, because otherwise nobody's going to let you do it.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll get into it. Bezat Hashem.
It's a beautiful thing.
Okay, so before we start, let's just remember the shitot we left off with yesterday, so everything works out today. Bezat Hashem. We had three shitot in the Braita yesterday. We had Rabbi Yehuda, we had Rabbi Nechemia.
Well, Rabbi Yehuda is the Tana.
Tana, and Rabbi Yossi. Okay?
Oh, they
This
are
is
all
the
Tanaim.
Braita. Exactly, three Tanaim.
Okay.
Three Tanaim we had in the Braita yesterday in terms of the Zman of bein hashmashot. Okay, how long is bein hashmashot? So Rabbi Yehuda said, if we remember, as we explained according to Rabba and according to Rav Yosef.
כסף עליון, כסף תחתון.
Exactly. Which means either, let's just remember the shiurim that we're
It
given.
starts when
It's kedai to remember.
it's gone there and it's light over there.
The horizon.
You see the light.
So according
and
to...
then משתחיל מחשיף העליון ולא התחתון, and then it's ending when both of them מחשיף. זה רבי יהודה.
One second again, but according to
Long
Rabba...
time of Shkia.
One second, the longest time, right. According to Rabba, Rabbi Yehuda means to say, bein hashmashot starts when the orb, the ball of the sun goes down.
The horizon.
And it's light the
And
other
it's
side.
light the entire side of the east. That's what we said. And it ends when
both
it's
are
dark.
מחשיף שניהם.
When it's
העליון
dark.
והתחתון.
The כסף עליון is also dark.
Exactly.
העליון והתחתון.
That's Rabba, okay? Rabba.
תחתון תמיד לפני העליון.
אז העליון
Okay.
והתחתון, שזה completely...
Which we said, according to Rabba, is 3/4 of a meal, which is 13.5 minutes. Okay, we spoke that out yesterday. According to Rav Yosef, he says a little bit of a smaller time.
Well,
He said it's beginning when the part towards the earth on the eastern horizon is already dark.
רבי יוסף או רבי יוסי?
Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef explained the Amorah. Rabbi Yosef explained that Rabbi Yehuda the Tana means to say bein hashmashot, when it's entirely lit up, that's still Yom. It's only bein hashmashot starting when the bottom half towards the ground is dark and the top half is light.
Okay.
That's bein hashmashot, and it ends the same time. It ends also
both מחשיפים.
when it's dark. Okay, the difference between them is a minute and a half. We said it's 1/12 of a meal. It's a very small difference, but either it's 13.5 minutes or 12 minutes. Fine. Good. Then we read Rabbi Nechemia in the Braita said that it's kedei hiluch chetzi mil. So we said if a meal is 18 minutes, Rabbi Nechemia will hold 9 minutes from Shkia to Tzeit will be bein hashmashot.
But
Smaller
the
shiur.
both, the Rabbi Nechemia, he said the time according to what? He don't give example of Rabbi Yehuda when it starts.
As I said, he just says chetzi mil.
But
Chetzi
chetzi
mil, which means when the sun goes down, chetzi mil from this, that's bein hashmashot. And
But
after that,
חצי
is
מיל
already
is 18
light.
minutes.
So
Period.
nothing to do with the light.
He
and
doesn't
the
say, Rabbi Nechemia just says, chetzi mil from when the sun goes down, after
How
that
do I know
is
the
light.
חצי מיל will be 9 minutes?
It's a calculation. Because it's really a machloket in the shitot.
If I walk, it's going to take 25 minutes.
Average walking, let's say.
Average
Average has to be. Whenever we talk about these
That's how they
shiurim, it's
calculate
average.
it.
Always average. Karagil, the normal stuff. The average benoni, the normal person, normal stuff. Also, by the way, when we talk about tfachim, amot, all of these things, it's by the average.
They're very similar, basically. Then.
Yeah.
Rabbi Yossi can
No,
find.
well, let's just say it's 9 minutes versus 12 or 13.5. It's a little bit. Rabbi Yossi says they're fine. And we're going to focus a little bit on Rabbi Yossi today, but let's just get, now we have that clear. Now we had a machloket within Rabbi Yehuda. Let's just go back to this shita. Rabba said a larger number.
Rav Yosef.
Rav Yosef said a smaller number. So we finished off yesterday. It's the opposite machloket when it comes to chalta li'inyan muktzeh. So what was the machloket there? Let's just remember, because we're going to pick up with today.
With the
We
zah.
said, let's just remember like this. Rashi explains the following. He says like this. Rabbi Yehuda is explained by Rabba to be 3/4 of a mil, 3/4 of a mil, and by Rav Yosef to be 2/3 of a mil. Okay? Rabba says 3/4 of a mil, and Rav Yosef says 2/3 of a mil. Now we said Le'inyan muktzeh on Shabbat, it's the opposite. So we explained yesterday that halacha is on Shabbat you're allowed to use something. It's not muktzeh so long as it's a kli or it's ochel. But if it's not considered a kli in halacha, it's muktzeh. You're not allowed to move it.
Again?
On Shabbat, you're allowed to move something that is a kli if it has some sort of a permissible usage. Even if it's a kli shemlachto le'isur, if you can use it for something that's mutar. So we said, example, a hammer to break nuts, even though the hammer is used for boneh, but it's also to be used for nuts because it's a kli, you're allowed to use it. But if it's not a kli, you're not allowed to move it. You're not allowed, asur l'taltila. We're going to see you're not allowed to move it. When it comes to a basket, in order for a basket to be considered a kli, we're going to see this. The same halachot we're going to see about the kli to be mekabel tum'ah is also the geder for being allowed to move it. It has to be a basket that can be moved. We're going to see maleh v'rekam, when it's full and when it's empty. Now, if it's such a big basket that when it's full you can't move it without breaking it, so then it's considered muktzeh on
Without
Shabbat.
breaking or without help?
Without breaking it, we're going to see. Without breaking it, it can't be moved without breaking it. We're going to get into that later. We'll see.
It's related also to the table, right? If two people move it in Shabbat.
So let's see. So the machloket we mentioned yesterday is how big is it that you're still allowed and that you're not allowed to move it. So in this, Rabba said the smaller measure. Rabba said if it's 2 kur, it's mutar to move, and Rav Yosef said even if it's 3. And they said the opposite, which is if it's 3, it's asur, and according to Rav Yosef, if it's 4, it's asur to move. It's not considered a kli anymore. So all we were pointing out was a way to remember these two machloket is they say the opposite shitot. Here, Rav Yosef says 2/3, and in terms of muktzeh on Shabbat, the kli, if it's 2 kur, according to Rabba, you're allowed to move it. 3, you're not allowed to. And then the inverse, in terms of bein hashmashot, Rabba says the larger number 3/4 of a mil. And in regards to muktzeh on Shabbat, if it's 3 according to Rav Yosef, you're allowed to move it. 4, you're not allowed
But
to move
according
it.
to Rav Yosef, the day is even longer.
Correct. That's okay. Point is just it's a memory tool. So let's see this inside now. Says the Gemara. We're holding the Amud Abaye, exactly. 5th line on the page. 6th line on the page. Amud Abaye, Abaye said the following. Lamed He Amud Aleph. Amud Abaye, Baye Minei Demar. I asked Rabba the following question. Mar is his Rebbe and his uncle, which was Rabba. So Abaye said, I asked Rabba the following question, B'sha'at Maaseh, and it was at the time of the Maaseh, meaning there was a story on Shabbat. I wanted to move a basket, so I asked him, am I allowed to? V'afilu bat trekuri lo sharali, and he wouldn't even allow me to move a basket that was only holding 2 kur. Now, Rabba himself said you could move a basket that holds 2 kur. Rabba said you're allowed to. And yet here, Rabba seems to say, he told Abaye at least, you could sit there, Yosef, because otherwise you're in front of the camera. Otherwise, Rabba said you're allowed to move a basket that holds 2 kur. And here he paskin for Abaye, V'afilu bat trekuri lo sharali. He wouldn't allow me to move a basket even if it only held 2 kur, which means Rabba seems to be machmir over his own shita. Rabba said you can't even move a basket that could hold 2 kur. So the Gemara says, come on, who does Rabba hold like? Where did he get this psak from? So the Gemara says, K'aitana. There is a Mishnah that reflects this opinion. Now we're going to show in terms of Hilchot Kabbalat Tumah, okay, if it's able to receive Tumah or not, we're going to see there is a Shita who says, in order to be Mekabel Tumah, it has to be a Kli. Okay? We're going to see there is a Shita who says, if it holds 2 kur, it's not considered a Kli for Kabbalat Tumah. So we're going to say it's the same thing here. In terms of Hilchot Shabbat, it's not considered a Kli if it doesn't hold 2 kur. And this was what Rabba was being machmir like.
But how the measurement reflect about receiving Tumah, no?
Exactly, that's a very interesting chidush. We're saying over here is, what is the geder of kli? What we find by Kabbalat Tumah. And you can apply the same geder, if it's 2 kur there, it's also 2 kur legabi Shabbat. So muktzeh to move it if it's 2 kur, because that's not considered a kli. That's exactly what we're doing. We're going to show, that's something else, nothing to do. We're talking about kli in terms of being able to contain things, like a basket of sorts. That's a different issue with materials. So the Gemara says like this. Kiman ka'aitanas. The Gemara says this this Mishnah, is going to reflect the Shita. It's Mishnah and Kelim that seems to hold 2 kur is not a kli to mekabel tum'ah. It's in the Mishnah there says as follows. Kaveret is a beehive, but it's shaped like a beehive. It means you have a basket that's a round basket. Hakash, either it's made out of kash, which is straw. It's like a wood material. The kaveret hakanim. Hey. Or kaveret hakanim. It's made out of kanim. Kanim are reeds, like it's what grows in the swamp. You know? Suf, reeds. Ubor sfina alexandrite. Or if it's the containers used in the boats of Alexandrite. When these boats used to go out, the water was salty, the salt water. So they would take for drinking these large containers of fresh water. That's they would use. Alexandria is probably from Egypt. But the point is, they had these extremely large, they were tanks basically, these large containers for keeping water in it to drink. So these, what we're talking about here, are very large containers. That's the point. So, says the Mishnah in Kelim, Afal pi sheyesh lahem shulayim, even if it has a bottom, means it could contain things, it for sure could hold things. Vehein machzikot 40 sa'ah belach, and it can hold 40 sa'ah of liquid. Okay, 40 sa'ah of liquid. Shehein kurayim biyavesh, which is 2 kur if it's a dry item. Now remember, a kur is 30 sa'ah. So, it can hold 40 sa'ah, these containers, if they can hold 40 sa'ah of liquid, which is 2 kur of a dry, like apples, which 2 kur is 60 sa'ah. That means that if it can hold 40 sa'ah of liquid, it can hold 60 sa'ah of dry. How does that work? We'll see in a minute. 1 second, we'll see in a minute. Tehorim, those baskets are not going to be mekabel tum'ah, those containers. Why are they not mekabel tum'ah? So says Rashi, because we learn, Rashi says we learn a drasha hekish between kli'etz and sak. Sak is a certain material. Sak is only mekabel tum'ah. It's only considered a kli, that it's mekabel tum'ah, if it's able to be moved maleh v'rekam, meaning when it's empty or when it's full. Since these baskets are made out of etz, they're made out of wood, and if you would fill these baskets up, you wouldn't be able to move them without it breaking. So therefore, this is not considered a kli because of how big it is, and it's not mekabel tum'ah. Now let's just tie it back in. So therefore, says the Gemara, Rabba was telling Abaye, just as in terms of hilchot tum'ah, it's not considered a kli if they're so large because it can't be moved when it's full. So too in hilchot Shabbat, it's not considered a kli, and therefore you're not allowed to move it if it's even 2 kur, even if it contains.
You're not allowed to move it.
You're not allowed to move it because it's not a kli. To move it on Shabbat, it has to be a kli, just like the halachot of tum'ah. Now, what everybody
he's holding something. It is a kli.
Correct. No, but it's a vessel. But in hilchot, in halacha, is that a kli? So we have to know for kabbalah tum'ah. We have to know for hilchot Shabbat.
The truth is not really a kli, because we want to move it from here to here. In order for that, it's gonna be ripped. It's gonna be broken already.
It seems like
it's not really a kli.
One way to look at it.
It's not really a kli. You understand? It's like holding temporary, very temporary. Once you want to move it, it's gonna rip, it's gonna fall apart. It's not a kli anymore.
It's not so big.
זה לא פשוט, זה גדול מאוד, זה גדול.
These are huge containers.
So how are you able to remove, according to Rabba and Rabbi Yosef, 2 or 3 kur?
Okay, so they're cholek.
These are big.
They say a little more, but the point is, as someone pointing out of here, Rabba said there is a Mishnah in Kelim that's more machmir than me. Because I hold you can even move it on Shabbat if it's 2 kur. That's the Mishnah in Kelim seems to hold you can't move it. It's not a kli even if it's 2 kur. You're not allowed to. 30 sa'ah, exactly. Now I just want to explain something because I didn't explain this yet. What did the Mishnah there say? It says this type of a container can hold 40 sa'ah of lach, which is 60 sa'ah of yavesh. Ma pshat?
I tell you because יש משקל סגולי. There's some things that they dry, they're heavier than the liquid.
So that's not. Here we're talking about it's a amount. It's more. Yeah, it's going to be more.
So
it will be more. So Rashi says.
Because usually the waters take the whole
The
there.
pshat is you could pile things up. That's the pshat. Water, when it goes above the lip or the rim of the container, it's going to spill over. You put apples into a container, it can go above the lip.
Yeah, fair.
So therefore, you could actually have more yavish than lach. It could be 60 versus 40.
So it's not really, you can really use overloaded.
Overloading, exactly. It's like, they have those all-you-can-eat buffets where you load up one plate.
Exactly.
So go for the dry, because you put soup in there, it's going to spill over right away. It's not
Never
going
do
to
Always lose money. Never do open buffet.
Now Rashi just points out something very important, which we have to realize. It's not always. How can you say 40 lach, 60 yavesh? It depends on the size of the width and the height. And so Rashi says we're talking about average kelim where govan was kechatzi rochban. It was a round kli where the height was half of the size of the width. So such a kli, this measure it'll be 40 of lach, which will be 60 of yavesh.
Exactly.
So therefore Abai is about to point out, just to finish the point here, you see that above the lip, you can add a third more to that basket, which is 20 more, to 40. That's what you see. So it says Abai.
Normally you're going to hold 3 bags in your hands, but when you get up to the house, you're going to take 25 bags here and just to do it in one time, right?
Exactly.
You're going to load more.
Exactly. Let's see that inside. Amar Abai, so Abai finished up. He said, Shma mina hai gudsha. We see from this the rim, the gudsha, what you pile above the rim, like gadush is piled up. What you pile above the rim, tilta have, tilta shlosha, or shlish. It's a shlish more than what it could contain by itself. What's the point? So mekach umemka, when it comes to sales, if you say you're going to sell somebody sa'ah gadush or gedusha, you're selling him a sa'ah piled up. You don't sell him 1 sa'ah. You actually have to sell him 1.5 sa'ah. That's what Abai says. It's a mekach umemka.
An eighth or a third?
1.5.
Tilta is not
It's a third more, because the container itself contains 40. How much more with its yavish will you...
It's 1.5.
20 more, which is a third more. So therefore, if you say you're selling 1 sa'ah, a gedusha type of sa'ah, you actually have to sell 1.5. Very interesting. That's what it comes out. But the point is, we've shown there is a shita that exists like this. That's why Rabbi was being machmir. Now let's go back to our sugya. So we had a machloket, Rav Yosef within Rav Yehuda, but either way you learn that what it was the Geder Rav Yehuda said. He said there's a reality you could look at. Look at the eastern horizon after the sun has gone down, see if it's lit up over there. That's what Rav Yehuda said. If it's lit up, so now it depends on the shittot which one you go with. But he says look at the eastern horizon. That's what Rav Yehuda said. The Tana, eastern horizon, Mizrach. Look at the Mizrach, that's what it said. That's what the language of the Braita was.
Kasif is light, is day.
No, but what was the language of the Braita? It said, Kol zman shepnei Mizrach ma'adimin. Okay? So the Gemara now tells us a story with Abai and Rava that seems to be different. Abai chazia leRava, it was Erev Shabbat, and Abai saw Rava dekada'ave le'ma'arav. He was looking, but where was he looking? Ma'arav. He was looking at the west. Rashi says, he was looking to see, is it yet bein hashmashot, is it yet nighttime? So Abai saw Rava was looking at the west. So Amar Leisa Abai said to Rava, V'atanya kol zman shepnei mizrach ma'adimin. We learned, Rabbi Yehuda told us, where do you have to look? At the east. But why are you looking at the west?
Also we spoke about the sun itself when it's below the horizon.
So let's say that, I hear what you're saying. He wanted to see if the sun had gone down. It sounds like the sun had gone down. He was trying to see, is there still light in the sky? Why are you looking at the west, Abai said to Rava? Rabbi Yehuda told us, Pnei Mizrach ma'adimin.
I don't understand. When the sun is going that way, it's getting red over there. I don't see the red in the ocean. It's
more lit up in the west.
But
more lit up in the west. The chiddush is, even in the east, there's going to be light. That's the point. That's the point. So Rabbi Yehuda told us, look at the east. Why are you looking at the west? That's what Abai said to Rava. Amar le Rava explained, no, you don't understand what the Braita is teaching you. It's very interesting. When we understood Kozman Shepnei Mizrach Ma'adimin, we understood is what's the determinant, what's the important point? Is there light in the east or not? Okay, so then is it bein hashmashot, is it Laila, but is there light there or not? So Rava said, no, you don't understand. Let me explain it outside and we'll see it inside. Rava said back, the pshat in the Braita is, really, if you want to know, is it bein hashmashot, is it laila, you have to look at the west. The west is the stronger way of figuring it out.
Of course.
Why? Because if you see in the west that the light is strong enough that you know it will be reflected in the east, you hear what I just said?
It's changing the whole
so
concept
then
now.
you know that it's still either bein hashmashot or it's Yom, whatever it is. The determination Rava said is really the main factor. It's not changing the concept actually.
It's the west, like.
It's really the west because that's where the sun is.
but
One second. Rega. The point is that you have to look in the west and see, is it light enough in the west, in the Ma'arav, that it's strong enough still that it's reflected in the east.
So we have to look both sides, and that's
Now,
it.
why is that important?
But how gonna know?
Why is that important? Be a scientist. Why is that important?
No, it's
Because he says like this, there's some days that the light is strong enough in the west, but it's a cloudy day, so it won't be reflected in the east. So therefore,
So the east is not indication.
so
for
therefore,
you to
some
know.
days you
have
won't
to look
know
at the
by
west.
looking at the east. So you have to look at the west. Is the light be'etzem strong enough in the west that it could reflect in
reflect
the
on the
east?
east.
That it's shayach. That's what Rava was saying to Abai. The Breita wasn't telling us that really the crucial part is the east. The crucial part is the light strong enough in the west that it could reflect in
Like
the
the
east.
What's
root
my
and-
measurement to see if it's strong or
You
not?
have to be a little bit of a scientist. A little bit. A
It's
little
talking
bit.
about to every person here. To regular person,
So-
I want to know it's established.
We'll get into that at the
They
end of
had
the
to watch
sugya if we
back
have
then.
time. We're running out of time, but if we get into it, we'll speak about it at the end of the day today. But let's just say for now, people that know how
But
the
this is
sun
not a
works.
measurement to a regular person? To know when Shkia start?
So we'll get into that at the end of the day today. Bezat Hashem, we'll see. So Rava says back, let's see it inside. Amar le, Rava said back to Abaye, Mi savrit pnei mizrach mamash. Did you think Rabbi Yehuda and the Breita meant actually the east being lit up? That's what's chashuv? Lo. Panim hama'adimim et hamizrach. It means the light that causes the east to light up. Mazeh causes. It means the light in the west is really what's most important. If the light in the west is strong enough that it could cause the east to light up, that's considered either still bein hashmashot or yom, however you figure it out. But the point is, that's really what's important. And again, that's what the Mefarshim speak out. Why is that a better way of figuring it out? Because some days there'll be clouds or there'll be some sort of a block. You won't see it in the east, but it's not necessarily night yet. Even though you look there, it's dark in the east, but it's not Laila yet because it's still lit up very much in the west. That
What do
it
you
could
do if it's
cause
really cloudy?
the east to light
If
up.
it's really cloudy,
That's what Rava's saying.
But
He's
also
saying,
in the west it's cloudy.
okay, so that makes things complicated. I hear that. Rashi gives a mashal,
No,
which the
because-
Gemara is about to mention. The mashal is if you have light shining through a window, through a chalon, right? And it shines on the wall opposite. Right? How do you figure out if there's light? By looking at the wall opposite or looking where the light's coming from the window, the sun behind it. That's more of an easy
the
way
source.
to determine. So he says the same thing. Look at the west and it'll tell you, is it strong enough that it could shine on the east? So even if there's something blocking it, that still could tell you if it's bein hashmashot, laila, etc. Ikadamina, there was another version of the story, which is the same thing, just the opposite. Rava, Chazila Abaye. What happened was actually Rava saw Abaye erev Shabbat. The Kada'avil Mizrach, he was looking at the east. So Rava saw that Abaye took the Breita literal and he was looking at the east. So Amarli Rava said to Abaye, Mi savet pnei mizrach mamash doesn't mean look at the east. Rather, panim ha'adimim et ha'mizrach. Rather, it means you have to look at the west, which shines up the east. The simnich kavta, and the siman to remember this is like a window, like I just explained. Really look where the light comes from, not what it shines on. Now Yochai is saying something which is, it is hard to figure this out. There's no question, because when we say, before we were saying this shiur, it's lit up on top, it's not lit up on bottom. We spoke this out yesterday. It's not necessarily so easy to figure this
And
out.
also you were talking about a gap of
Minutes.
4 minutes between
Minutes.
3 different
Minutes.
Tanaim.
This is minutes, 100%. So today we have Zmanim, Baruch Hashem, that it's very clear. For them back in the day, we're going to see they had to be machmir because they didn't know exact. Today we have Zmanim. We know exactly when candlelighting is. We know exactly when Shkia is. We know we have it perfectly figured out. And still, by the way, we do Tosafot Shabbat. We're supposed to add on. But the point is, these shiurim are not exactly so easy to determine. Maybe if you're a scientist or you're able to figure it out better, but it's not so easy.
But that's what we spoke about the same Choma of the Zav, right? That we basically don't want to fall into the first tier to the highest tier of the Zab. That's why we basically start מבעוד יום and we end when it's actually after the צאת הכוכבים.
The Zab, מה אתה אומר Zab?
Because we said Zab, that can be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Oh, then it would act as a
That's
chumrah.
basically the case that we did with
so
the
bein hashmashot
hashmashot.
bechlal or machmir because we're mesupak, exactly. Okay, let's move on now to Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Nechemia said kedehilu chatzi mil, which we said is roughly 9
אז
minutes.
מה ללכת חצי מיל?
Rabbi Nechemia omer kedei shehalech adam mishetishka chama chatzi mil. So we said, Rabbi Nechemia said, how long is bein hashmashot? From when the sun goes down, the ball of the sun goes down, to walk half of a mil. So we said it's roughly 9 minutes. I do want to mention something which I mentioned yesterday, but there is a shita of Rabbeinu Tam, which is his whole shita about bein hashmashot. It's actually later. It is later, and actually those Hasidim that rely on Rabbeinu Tam, you'll see them driving after we've already accepted Shabbat on ourselves.
You already
You
left
do
the shul.
find such a concept. They daven Arvit, they daven Mincha later. You could find such a concept. I just want to point out. If you hold legamre,
Rabbi,
if you hold,
Rabbi Yosef bring about it, he said was one case in Yerushalayim,
yeah.
and everybody go against the Zab and stop it.
So
Only lechumra, Rabbeinu Tam.
So we hold the Chumrah, maybe Rabbeinu Tam. Some people don't even hold Rabbeinu Tam. That's fine. But the point is, if you hold the Gamre of Rabbeinu Tam, theoretically, it's day far more later than according to the other
I don't think
shittot.
so. I don't think so. And
But just,
normal
I'm not
community
getting into
people-
Rabbeinu Tam. I'm not getting into it. We're explaining the sugya not like Rabbeinu Tam. There is a different ma'alech, which we're not going to get into today.
But
wanted
then
to
to
be clear
live
about
Shabbat, to finish Shabbat.
We don't do that. We don't do that. We're makbir. We have Tosfot Shabbat. We add on before, no question.
No, to
Yeah.
Shabbat end.
Of course, that's a different story. It's machloket,
Shabbat end.
different shitot,
But
right?
also they do it during Yom Chol, not only
Exactly. They'll daven mincha later because
After the Shkia.
After the Shkia, exactly, because theoretically Shkia is later.
Yes, but nobody drive today on after the Shkia
Yeah,
Shabbat.
I hear. Weiter. So
Davening
Rabbi Nechemia-
late, yes, but
No, I hear what you're saying. It could be. Rabbi Nechemia omer kidei she'alech
if you
adam
daven late,
shishka chama
it means
chatzi
that you
mil.
also apply your day.
Now, we said this measurement of chatzi mil, half of a mil, is 9 minutes. So what the Gemara here tells us is, if you want to know the bein hashmashot of Rabbi Nechemia, there is a physical manifestation. You just asked this. What is the physical reality you could do? You could do a science project and figure it out. What is it? Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Chanina, you want to know, according to Rabbi Nechemia, how long is the bein hashmashot and when is going to be Laila? I'll tell you what you could do. Where is Har Carmel? Where is it today? Har Carmel.
Har Carmel and
Where
next
is
to
it?
Haifa.
Next to Haifa. And which yam is next to Har Carmel?
הים התיכון.
מה זה הים
The
התיכון?
Mediterranean.
Mediterranean Sea, Yam HaGadol it's called here, right? So,
According
the
to the different
Mediterranean...
opinions, because some of them say that it's the Oceanus. We learn together about it.
Okeanos, okay, I don't know, that's interesting. So the Rabbi Chanina explains like this. How can you figure out his shiur? Yaniach Chama berosh HaKarmel. What could happen is he's standing on top of Har Carmel, and the sun is just above the mountain, meaning it's starting to set, and it's just above the mountain. So it means the guy is standing on top of Har Carmel, and he leaves the sun when it's just above the mountain, when it's going down. V'yered v'yitvol b'yam v'aleh. He could go down, Tovel in the, I assume Yam HaGadol, I just want to point out the Mediterranean.
That's the only
V'aleh, and get to the top of the mountain. That will be already nighttime. Evantem? Evantem? The guy standing on top of Har Carmel when the sun is just above the mountain,
You know how far it is to get from the mountain
if
to
he
the
goes
ocean?
down to the ocean, does tefillah, goes back to the top of Har
Walking?
Carmel, walking, some say quickly, that will be the 9 minutes, and then it will be your nightfall by the time he gets back to the top of the mountain. That's what he says here.
By
Very
the way,
interesting.
Rashi said Shem Har Sha'al Sfat Hayam.
Right.
It's not, maybe it's not this Har
It's
Carmel,
different
that
Har
in
Carmel.
Haifa. אז Har Carmel in Haifa עד שיראה,
זה
לא
רחוק.
הגיע מוצאי שבת כבר.
It's far.
Zeu shiur of Rabbi Nechemia. This is the shiur of Rabbi Nechemia. Very interesting. He says this is you could do any sayon. If you want to figure it out yourself, that's the shita of Rabbi Nechemia. At 9 minutes sounds easier to me. That's it.
Listen,
Alright.
there is some cliffs
Uh,
next to Netanya, next to Haifa, Akko,
Yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
בשפלה יותר, a little bit higher above Tel Aviv, but I don't know how you can make it a 9 minutes.
Amar B'chia. Let's see. Amar B'chia says B'chia. Now we're on a little bit of a tangent because we're talking about if you want to figure things out, this is what you could do. Rabbi Chia says, we know throughout the Midbar, when the Jews were traveling for 40 years, there was a special rock, a boulder, that provided water in the zechut of Miriam Hanviyah. We know 3 gifts were given to the Jewish people in the Midbar. One of them was Be'erah Miriam, which was a rock that brought water forth. So the Gemara here says, if you want to know, at the end of the 40 years, that rock went off somewhere. You want to know, you want to go see it? You can do a science project and you could see it.
Is that something to do with the Ari in the Kinneret or something?
So there's a different midrash that says differently, but the Gemara here says like this. Ya'aleh l'rosh HaKarmel. Again, go to the top of Har HaKarmel.
It's very.
There's a breita that's midrash Asad says differently, but the Yitzbeh, and he should look forward. V'yir'en, he'll see Kimin kvara b'yam. Kvara is a sieve. They use it to sift something. Like a round thing where the twa goes into. Right. So he'll see something like a round rock in the ocean. Now again, if you learn Kipshuto, it sounds like in the Yam HaGadol, in the Mediterranean. The Midrash apparently says differently than this. It says a different thing, but this is what the Gemara says. V'zuhi be'erah shel Miriam. From that point, you'll be able to see the rock that was be'erah shel Miriam that provided the Jews with water in the 40 years. Amar Rav. So Rav finishes off this point and he says like this. Usually, if you have a kli holding water, that water is A, mekabel tum'ah, and B, that's called mayim she'uvim, and it's not good for mikveh. You can't use that for mikveh. Mayim she'uvim means drawn water. So mekabel tum'ah, and it's mayim she'uvim, you can't use it for mikveh. So says Rav, ma'ayana mitaltel tahor. There is an example of a ma'ayan, a spring that's mitaltel, that's movable. Usually a spring comes from the earth. You can't move the earth like that. You can't move the spring. But there is an example of ma'ayana mitaltel, where the whole spring could move. The whole thing moves, and the water is still tahor, means it's not considered a kli, so it's not mekabel tum'ah, and it's not mayim she'uvim. V'zeu be'erah shel Miriam. That was the example of be'erah shel Miriam. What does it mean? It means even though that rock would move, it was considered adamah, it was considered earth. It was considered coming from the ground, and therefore the water was not mikabel tum'ah, even though it was in something, and also it could be used for mikveh. A person could be tovel in this. I mean, that's the only example in history, because usually the water comes from the earth. You can't move that situation. This is a chidush in history. Let's continue. Okay. Now, we know.
But is it to do something with the 9 minutes?
No, that's not. It's just an idea. As Har HaKarmel, you could see the experiment to figure out in Nechem. You would go on a 10. You could also see be'erah shel Miriam.
But according to Rav Nehemiah, let me just 1 second. He just said that it's below the horizon. And this is like, this is the time of bein hashmashot.
When the sun goes down.
bein hashmashot.
No, again, when the sun goes down, go down to the water, come up back to the top of the water, and that's the end. That's going to be Laila. That's what he says. We're saying also it's Chatzei Mil, which is 9 minutes.
You can still see the sun when you go down from the mountain.
When you see it above the mountain, just above the mountain, go down. So he's saying, just above the mountain, go down, come back up to the top, and that will be Laila. That's what he says. Litvol, exactly. This is, you have to be very...
9 minutes, I don't know. It's very quick.
Yeah, it seems very quick. I agree. All right. Now, we know that the halacha is that the Gemara in the beginning of Masechet Brachot tells us that there's a concept where if a kohen is tameh, he's not allowed to eat truma. Let's say he touched a dead sheretz, he was a balkeri, all of these things. So, what does he have to do in order to be tahor to eat truma? So we know that the halacha is as follows. No, not necessarily. The point is like this. He has to go to the mikveh. He has to go to the mikveh be'od yom, while it's still day. And he has to wait for night. When night comes, then he's allowed to eat truma. But now, he has to go to the mikveh while it's still day. Okay? What about bein hashmashot? Well, bein hashmashot is a safek. So he's not allowed to go to the mikveh if you're machmir, which we are machmir on both sides. He has to go to the mikveh before bein hashmashot. Everybody understand that?
But we had a situation with this guy that taking the...
What happens if he goes to the mikveh when it's night already? What's the halacha? He has to wait till the next night. Means because he has to do erev shemsho, he has to wait for nightfall the next day, and then only can he eat
next business day.
Exactly. It's at least one business day. So, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel says Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel.
But we spoke about this guy that doing the roof tchumin. And we said, what happened if the dog ate it?
Correct.
So for one end, it's still day.
Correct.
The other end, it's already night.
Why? Because safek d'Rabbanan lekula, exactly. But now we're talking about truma. Truma is d'oraita. So this is a different story.
Safek d'oraita לחומרה.
So let's see. Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, says Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Bein hashmashot de Rabbi Yehuda, and this is a little bit unclear, but he says like this. Bein hashmashot de Rabbi Yehuda. The time of bein hashmashot, according to Rabbi Yehuda, which we know is 12 minutes or 13 and a half minutes, Kohanim tovlin bo, the Kohanim are allowed to go to the mikveh during that time. So the Gemara immediately says, Laman, according to which shita would they be allowed to go? What's Shmuel saying here? The Kohanim could go to the mikveh during the time of bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yehuda. It can't be according to Rabbi Yehuda's own shita because he holds that's the time of the safek. So you shouldn't be allowed to go. That's not considered vadayom. So if you tell me this is according to Rabbi Yehuda's own shita, sveko, but that's a safek. That's not vadayom. So why would that be allowed? So Ela the Gemara says like this. Interesting chidush. Bein hashmashot de Rabbi Yehuda. During the time of bein hashmashot, according to Rabbi Yehuda, let's say the 12 minutes after the sun goes down, le Rabbi Yossi, according to Rabbi Yossi, Kohanim tovlin bo. Kohanim could go to the mikveh during that time. Rabbi Yossi holds, what is bein hashmashot?
K'erev ayin.
K'erev ayin. So according to Rabbi Yossi, during the 12 minutes or 13 and a half minutes Rabbi Yehuda says as bein hashmashot, the Kohanim could still go to the mikveh. That would be considered daytime.
Ma?
Rabbi Yehuda holds bein hashmashot is 12 minutes or 13 and a half minutes.
But there is two shitot.
So Rabbi Yossi, who holds bein hashmashot is k'erev ayin, he would hold that it's considered vadayom during the shiur given by Rabbi Yehuda. Memela, the Kohanim could go to the mikveh during that time.
So Rabbi Yossi say that after this 12 minutes or 13 and a half minutes, then it starts K'erev ayin?
That's what it would seem. That's what it would seem. What Matan just said. It would appear from this that we're saying
So
Rabbi Yossi's measurement of K'erev ayin, when is it? It's something, 3 seconds, but it's something, this is what we're assuming now, the end of Rabbi Yehuda's measure of bein hashmashot. You okay with me?
Rabbi Yossi sounds like he's sover, like Rabbi Yossi.
Rabbi Yossi.
Because he says as long as it's still day.
So what comes out of Shmuel is saying, if you hold like Rabbi Yossi, that the zman of bein hashmashot is k'erev ayin, a kohen could go to the mikveh for the 13 and a half minutes before the k'erev ayin, and that's considered vadayom.
K'erev ayin is at the end of the time of Rabbi Yehuda.
Oh, so says the Gemara, but now we have to figure that out. So the Gemara says, what is this? What does Rabbi Yossi then hold? So the Gemara says like this.
So it's the same thing. Because K'erev ayin is just a blink of an eye.
So it's the inside. Ela bein hashmashot Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi kohanim tovlin bo. It means according to Rabbi Yossi, you can go to the mikveh then because that time is yom. So the Gemara says pshita, but that's obvious. According to Rabbi Yossi, it's K'erev ayin, the time before is vadayom. So what's the chidush in saying that? Your chidush is saying he goes to the mikveh during the day. There's no chidush in saying that. So the Gemara says the answer, which Matan was really just touching on. Mao de tema, you may have said, bein hashmashot de Rabbi Yossi meshach shayach b'd Rabbi Yehuda. When Rabbi Yossi says k'erev ayin, where do you place the k'erev ayin? There's two ways to look at this. Either you could say, let's say this is the measure, this is the bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yehuda. Now the k'erev ayin of Rabbi Yossi could be at the end of it, or it could be after it. Now if you hold it's the end of it, you can't tell me Rabbi Yossi would hold that you can go to the mikveh the entire bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yehuda, because you could only for the beginning part, but the last part of it, Rabbi Yossi would say, cannot go to the mikveh because that's already safek. The chidush that Shmuel is saying here is Rabbi Yossi's shiur is after the entirety of Rabbi Yehuda's shiur, not at the end of it, but after all of it. Memeli, you can go to the mikveh the entire shiur of bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yehuda. Let's read that inside, because Ma'od Tema, you may have said.
1 second.
We just read it 1 second. Hold on. Ma'od Tema, you may have said bein hashmashot Rabbi Yossi meshach shayach b'd Rabbi Yehuda, that the bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yossi connects, it's attached to the bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yehuda. It's the end of it. And then how could Shmuel say that according to Rabbi Yossi you could go to the mikveh anytime during this? Kamash malan, dishlim bein hashmashot Rabbi Yehuda, that first the bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yehuda is over, it's finished. V'adar matchil bein hashmashot Rabbi Yossi, and only then Rabbi Yossi's bein hashmashot begins. Now what Yochai just asked is, if Rabbi Yossi's bein hashmashot is 2 seconds, so l'may nafkamina. So Tosfot, because of that, says must be that Rabbi Yossi's bein hashmashot doesn't start right after the bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yehuda, but it's a little bit of time later. Meaning it's somewhat disconnected. It has to be not just immediately after, because if it's immediately after, what's the difference immediately after the second of the end of it? He says it must be, it's a little bit after. It's a little bit after, and then there's some time in between.
When we talk about Rashi, Kerefine, it's like you close your eye gently,
that's
strongly. And
correct. That's why Tosfot forced to say that idea exactly.
But still, it's a 1 second. But that makes sense.
Yes,
it's very edgy.
Maybe it's a minute later.
It's not really next right after. It's a Rabbi Yehuda times finish space.
A minute.
Small
let's say.
space.
Exactly.
A minute.
He doesn't say, but he says some short time. The point
And then
is,
Rabbi Yossi's time starts.
the
blink.
And the whole thing we're talking about here is minutes. Everything we're talking about here, even 13 and a half minutes. So there, a minute might make a difference. So there, the chidush is, according to Rabbi Yossi, the time of bein hashmashot is after Rabbi Yehuda. Mainly, you can go to the mikveh the entire time of Rabbi Yehuda. That's excellent. Let's go ahead, Chev. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar
But we actually learn about. So Tvul Yom is applied only for Kohanim, or
there's other examples also.
Baal Keri.
No, there are other examples, but
so
this is
those things actually apply also for a person that wants to go to the mikveh.
The thing is, I believe so, but Truma is only eaten by Kohanim, so that's why we're giving an example.
This is according to the Truma, but let's say I want to go to the mikveh.
Just to be taho.
I think
you're
whatever.
right. I think you're right. There are examples of Tful Yom for a Yisrael, I believe, but it doesn't need Truma, so that's not Nogea, right? Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabba Bar Chana says like this: I'm machmir on both sides. Halacha k'Rab Yehuda le'inyan Shabbat, v'halacha k'Rab Yossi le'inyan Truma. So the halacha bein hashmashot is like Rabbi Yehuda le'inyan Shabbat, and like Rabbi Yossi le'inyan Truma. Now let's speak this out.
זה בעיה, אם תגיד רבי יוסי עניין בין השמשות, אולי שבת כבר.
So Rabbi Yochanan is saying, I am machmir on both sides. So what is he saying? Let's just speak it out for a second. I understand you're machmir for Erev Shabbat, like Rabbi Yehuda, because if you hold like Rabbi Yossi, so you should be allowed to do melacha later.
After bein hashmashot.
Oh, so a machmir like Rabbi Yehuda begins earlier. Okay, I understand that. But what does it mean? A machmir like Rabbi Yossi le'inyan Truma.
שהוא טובל אחרי סוף זמן ראשון שבטוח לילה.
That's not a chumrah, that's a kula.
למה?
Because you could go to the mikveh later. Oh, sorry, no, what you just said. All right, let's see. So the Gemara says, Bish lama, very good, Bish, very good.
אחרי שבטוח זה לילה.
Says the Gemara, Bish lama, halacha Rav Yehuda le'inyan Shabbat. I understand what it means, that the halacha is like Rav Yehuda le'inyan Shabbat means Erev Shabbat. You have to stop melacha earlier because the zman of bein hashmashot starts earlier. So the chumrah, that's a chumrah. Clearly, Rabbi Yochanan's mesupak, so that's a chumrah. Le'inyan truma mai. But what does it mean? Le'inyan truma, Rabbi Yochanan's machmir like Rabbi Yossi. Maybe you'll say it means that they can go to the mikveh. The problem is like this. You say it means in terms of the mikveh, according to Rabbi Yossi, it's a kula actually, because they can go to the mikveh even later, and it's still an acceptable mikveh. So sfeikai, that's a safek. How can they go to the mikveh later and be mekil if he's mesupak about the zman of bein hashmashot? That can't be the pshat. So turning to Lamed Hey Amud Bet, I think that's what you were just saying. Ella, what it means is not for mikveh. What it means is ella achilat truma. It means for eating truma. What is it?
So what, they're going to the mikveh and right after the
process.
20 minutes after they give you the truma?
One second. They're not allowed to eat truma until the end of the bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yossi. So what does it mean? It means like this. When are you allowed to go to the mikveh?
In the time of bein hashmashot according to Rabbi Yehuda.
Which means before the... No. The machmir. You can't go to the mikveh during the bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yehuda because that's a safek. No. So when do you have to go to the mikveh? Before the measure of bein hashmashot of Rabbi Yehuda. But when are they allowed to eat truma?
Rabbi Yossi.
After the time of Rabbi Yossi.
Because
that's a chumrah on both ends. So it says Rashi, it comes out like this, the Rishonim speak out. Really now, you could have said another chumrah le'inyan Shabbat like Rabbi Yossi. What is the other chumrah?
שמכניסים שבת. כמו רבי יהודה,
And when we Hotzaat
מוציאים כמו
Shabbat,
רבי יוסי.
Motzei Shabbat, we're machmir like Rabbi Yossi that we say
But
bein
no,
hashmashot
no.
extends further. So Memela actually, Rashi says, you could have said another chumrah like Rabbi Yossi even regarding
So you
Shabbat.
can apply it also for Shabbat, not only for the
Exactly,
Truma.
exactly. That's what he says. He says
אבל
that.
באמת,
He
רבנו
start
תם
before.
זה לא כמו רבי יוסי. זה אחרי.
Rabbi Natam's a different idea altogether.
different idea
He says that
altogether.
Shkiyah starts later, meaning you have more
Beautiful,
time in the
beautiful.
day, means it's a different inyan.
Yeah.
So basically what comes out is, the way the Gemara is saying it, we're machmir on both ends. We don't know if the psaka bein hashmashot, it's like a double safek here, because first of all, in terms of bein hashmashot, we don't know is it kulo yom, kulo laila, the beginning is yom, the end is laila, that's safek bichlal in the reality of bein hashmashot. Secondly, we have different shitot in terms of when is bein hashmashot. So memela, we're machmir, says Rabbi Yochanan, on both ends.
So Rabbi Yehuda says Shabbat start, the bein hashmashot start early. Rabbi
Exactly.
Yossi say bein hashmashot start later, right? So we start the Shabbat before, like Rabbi Yehuda, but they actually can eat the Truma
Only later.
after the bein hashmashot, which is later according to Rabbi Yossi.
And also, v'chen l'inyan motzei
Motzei
Shabbat, the
Shabbat.
same thing.
זה בטוח
It's
לילה.
like, you know, you
Exactly.
motzi
You
Shabbat.
wait for Vadai Laila.
ודאי
Exactly.
לילה.
That's what we're waiting for.
ודאי
Exactly.
לילה.
Very interesting what comes out this. It's very
שבת זה ספק חס שלום, כנראה.
exactly. Let's go ahead, Trevor. Let's go. Now Yochai was asking me before, this is something that's very difficult to determine. So what the Gemara here does, according to some of the Rishonim, it gives us a time that's easier to determine for bein hashmashot, for Vadai Laila. That's what we're about to see. This is a little bit
Gives us
harder
time to
determine bein hashmashot and Vadai Laila, which we're about to see. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel says like this: Kochav echad.
שלושה כוכבים.
This is the famous shir.
ככה גדלנו.
Oh, this is the famous shir. Kochav echad. If there's one star in the sky, so it's getting dark, and you look up in the sky and you see one star. Yom, that's still yom. That's day. Shnayim. If you see two
בין
stars,
השמשות.
bein hashmashot.
שלוש לילה.
So it's safek. Shlosha, if you see three, laila. Then you know that it's night. Oh, Tani Nami Achi, the Braita adds, it says, Kochav, it supports this. Kochav echad yom, shnayim ben hashmashot, shlosha laila, so the Braita supports this. Comes Rabbi Yossi bar Avin and he says, but it's not just any stars. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Avin, lo kochavim gdolim anirin bayom. It's not the large stars that you could see during the day. The big stars, some people say it's planets maybe.
מה הפלנט?
How do you say planets in Hebrew? Planets.
מאדים. מאדים.
No, Madim is planets? No.
פלנט זה...
Like Jupiter, like these things.
כוכבים, כוכבים.
But how do you say planets? There's a word
כוכבי
for-
לכת. כוכבי לכת. כוכב לכת. נוגה, ג'ופיטר.
Those things are called Kochav
כוכב
Lechet.
לכת, כן.
No, that's a shooting star. Kochav Lechet is Lechet means moving. מה אתה אומר? Planets. You know what is planets?
כן, כן,
Mars,
כן,
Jupiter,
כן, כן,
all
כן.
these things.
זה-
There's a word for it. Mazalot. I don't know what you call it in modern Hebrew. Yeah.
איך יש לזה מילה, לא...
I don't know if there is Kochav Lechet maybe. Okay. Anyways, the kids. So some people say that these large ones is planets. But
כוכבי
anyways,
לכת. איך אומרים פלנט?
planets.
איך אומרים פלנט? תעשה את זה צ'אנסלט.
P-L-A-N-E-T.
כוכבי לכת באנגלית. פלנטס.
Okay, there you go. Okay, good. Says the Gemara.
זה לא הולך, נראה לי זה לא הולך את זה.
Okay, that means it goes around.
רביי, everything for you, here.
Kochav.
All the planets.
Oh no, I know the planets. Okay.
And they give you like...
It's okay. Says the Gemara. So Rav Yossi bar Avini says like this: Lo kochavim gdolim hanir'in bayom. We're not talking about the large stars that could be seen during the day, because
Which is the
that
large star?
I don't know what that refers
That's
to.
the planet?
But it means is there's some stars you could see during the day. You
Uh-huh.
can't use that as the gedder because that's not Laila. Oh, velo kochavim ktanim she'ein nirin ela balayla, and it's not the small stars that could only be seen later in the night. Ela benonim. It means the average size stars. If you see three of those, you know it's night. Two, bein hashmashot, one is still considered the day.
Yeah.
And I want to point something out over here. The Rishonim say, wait a second. Before you're giving us a measurement which is Pnei Mizrach Ma'adimin, and when it's dark, and now you're giving us a totally different measure. Why do we need two measures of bein hashmashot?
Could be,
Or of Laila.
Could be because of the first measurement of the sun. It really depends your location, how you see that. שמיים, מכל מקום רואים אותו דבר. To look at the sky, you see from every place you see the same. It's open.
Okay, I hear.
What happens if it's cloudy?
So I'll just tell you what the Rishonim speak out here. There's opposite ways the Rishonim say. They say They wanted to give a measure that your average person could determine. And there's different ways the Rishonim say. Some Rishonim say Pnei Mizrach Ma'adimin is easier to figure out than this measure. And some say the opposite, is that looking at the stars is an easier measure to determine.
Why? What's that?
I don't know why. I mean, we have to do a little bit of stargazing. But the point is,
I think so. The star is much easier because
the two measures is so that wherever you are, however it is, it's easier for whoever it is to figure it out. Yeah.
Because you just said, it's
Alright.
very complicated to know
Yeah.
when is the day and when is the night.
Right.
When it's
Wow,
hashmashot.
you took me 40 something years back now.
Yeah.
I
You
remember
like this?
myself standing on the balcony of my grandma.
You're looking at 3 stars?
And we want to start...
You saw 3 stars?
כן, בטח.
מעניין.
ותחפשו 3 כוכבים.
אני לא שמעתי פעם שמישהו עושה את זה.
מה? כל הספרדים בארץ.
אבל היום יש לנו זמנים, ברוך השם.
45 years ago, 44 years
לא
ago,
היה
I was with the
זמנים,
kids.
אבל לא היה זמנים.
לא
Let's say you're in the
היה
house
כמו
and you
היום.
don't have
היום כל טלפון, כל בית כנסת, הכל רשום, כל מקום אתה רואה, אלונים, לא היה את זה.
But sometimes you
הכל
forget.
היה...
בכוכבים.
זה אני אומר לך, אתה לא מבין, I took me back to my סבתא עליה שלום, איזה... סבתא שלום היא צדיקות, ידעו את ההלכה, unbelievable.
Don't you see, it's not רגל הכוכבים.
כן.
מה שראינו זה, ראינו כוכבים, זהו.
Yeah.
הגדולים לא, וקטנים לא, בינוניים.
האמת היא,
That's why it's hard, I'm just saying.
I
it's not that
remember
easy.
when it was exactly like that. We see one, עוד לא, מחפשים, הנה עוד אחד, זה היה ממש כאילו...
היה שלוש.
מעניין.
כן.
אתה לא יודע
יאללה,
את
חבר'ה, let's
זה.
finish up here.
עכשיו, now the question is going to be, what size is the כוכב?
יאללה, let's go, חבר'ה. Amud Yossi Barbi Zvida, we have to finish up. Last point here.
מה זה בינוני?
Rabbi Yossi Barbi Zvida says the following: העושה מלאכה בשני בין השמשות חייב חטאת ממה נפשך. You have a person, he got lost.
Shabbat.
He got lost on Shabbat a little bit. So what happened was, as Rashi explains, the whole bein hashmashot Friday, and the whole bein hashmashot muktzeh Shabbat, he was doing melacha.
I'm sorry, again. What happened?
The guy got confused. He forgot it was Shabbat, whatever it was. It was elem achat. He was totally confused. So Friday means Friday night, which was bein hashmashot. Let's say for 12 minutes, he was involved in melacha the whole time. And again, Motzei Shabbat, the 12 minutes, he was involved in melacha the whole time. The whole bein hashmashot, let's just say whatever your shita is, he was involved in melacha. And we said before, if you do melacha during bein hashmashot karagil, a normal time, you can't bring a chatat because it's a safek if you're chayav. So the korban you bring is called Hasham Taloi. But where he did melacha, the entire bein hashmashot of Friday, and then the entire bein hashmashot of Motzei Shabbat, the entire thing, he's for sure chayav a korban chatat. Because memanefshach, however, either the first one that he did it in was
The first one is more lenient.
Yom. If you say bein hashmashot is Yom, so the first time he's patur, the second one he's chayav. You say the second one is Yom, so then the first one was Laila and you're chayav. And otherwise the third shita was, if you say it's Yom and then Laila in the same time, he's going to be chayav anyways. So the point is, in this case, he's not going to bring Hasham Taloi because it's not a safek anymore. He for sure was over on Chilul Shabbat. He'll have to bring a korban chatat
There is
vada.
no kula here that born of the
But
Matik.
maybe
Exactly.
Ben Hashmot Rabbi Yossi.
What's that?
Many use the end of Shabbat, the Ben Hashmot Rabbi Yossi.
That's the
אז
point.
עדיין הוא נופל
So
פה.
then in that safek, you'd say in that time.
כי הבן
Whatever
השמשות
you
יותר
hold is
מאוחר
bein
פה.
hashmashot. Whatever your bein hashmashot is, if he did it both Friday and Shabbat,
בצאת השבת הוא נופל,
he's
לא
going to
חי.
be chayav
כי
a
השבת יוצאת
korban.
יותר מאוחר. ביום, בערב שבת, זה נכנס יותר מאוחר.
Exactly.
בצאת שבת זה יוצא יותר מאוחר.
Exactly.
כי הכל יהיה יותר
לא
מאוחר.
חייב מיתה.
Well, it was b'shogeg we're talking about, right? Amar le Rava l'Shami. Now to finish up this sugya, Baruch Hashem, Rava said to his attendant like this. He said, "Look, it's actually funny. Yochai just said that. For people that are very makbid and they're able to figure out the zmanim, you could look v'chulei." So he said, "We can look at the stars. You could look." But he said to his attendant, "You guys are not b'kiyim in this inyan. So how should you know when you have to stop doing melacha?" So Amar le Rava l'Shami. Rava said to his shamis, his attendant, Atun de lokim lechu b'shiura de Rabbanan. You who don't know these measurements of bein hashmashot, you don't know exactly when it is, when it's dark, when it's light, when there's stars. So I'll tell you what you should do to be careful. Adeshim sha'aresh dikli, when you see the sun above the
Kalim.
palm trees, you see it above the palm trees.
Miami.
Atlush raga. So then you should light Shabbat, light nerot Shabbat, meaning it's a little bit before, but it's a smart thing. Don't wait till it's, just when you see it above the palm trees, that's a good idea to light Nerot Shabbat. So Gemara says, "B'yom ha'me'unan mai." What about if it's a cloudy day? You can't see the sun. So he says another measurement. B'mata, if you're in the city, chazei tarnegola. Look at the roosters. Rashi says the roosters used to stand on walls during the day, and they would go off of the walls when it was night. So if you see the roosters,
When the last time you see a rooster?
in this city we don't have perhaps, but in this city, Baruch Hashem, we have Zmanim too. So if you see the roosters on the wall, it's day. When you see them getting off, it's going to be night. Bedavra, and what about in the fields? Orvi, ravens. The ravens would stay in the fields. Davra's in the outside of the. It's like the farms, like outside. When you see them leaving the fields, they're in the fields during the day. When they leave, that means it's going to be night. Inami, or a final pshat, the Gemara says, is ada'ani. Rashi says ada'ani is a type of plant called malve.
Chalmit.
And it's a type of plant, very interesting, that it follows the sun wherever it is during the day. It means when the sun rises, it faces the east. Middle of the day, the plant follows to the center, and then it goes towards the west as the sun sets.
Wow.
So if you look at this plant,
What is it again?
it's a plant
Chalmit.
that it follows the sun. It follows the sun.
Okay.
In the morning, when the sun rises, it faces the east, towards the sun.
Oh, those flowers that open and close?
Open and close.
Alim.
It follows the sun.
The leaves notim.
In the middle of the day, it's facing upwards.
Okay.
And towards the evening, you see it facing. So when you see that plant facing towards the west, you know it's already going to be Shabbat soon, and you should light your Shabbat candles. I don't know what plant this is. I'm curious, actually.
Like, let's say,
Chalmit.
Chalmit. You know what that is? You've heard of
Chalmit?
it?
Said Chalmit.
Yeah.
הנה,
Rashi says
הרב,
Marava. I don't know. It's Old French. I don't know what that is. Very interesting.
חלמית, בעברית.
חלמית,
Chalmit.
הרב גוגל,
ח' למד.
חלמית.
Chalmit. I don't know. It's very interesting. So
זה
that's
מה
another way of
חלמית,
determining.
בוא נראה.
Yalla Chevra, we'll stop
Wow.
here. Tanu Abanan, we'll pick up with the
Wow,
Tkiyot,
wow,
the
wow.
sirens tomorrow, Be'ezat Hashem.
אהבתי, הבנתי כל מילה.
וואו.
This one it's called mellow.
All right, Chevra,
Wow.
stop here.
חזק וברוך.
It's called what? Mallow.
תראה לי.